Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to episode 58 of Fracking Nightmare. And as you can see, once again, I'm joined by Vanessa Vine in the studio. So this is becoming rather a sort of regular thing.
Well, it won't be after tonight.
Well, I think you better explain what it is that you're doing down here in the southwest of England.
Having a rest from fracking campaigning. 6 weeks house sitting, yeah. And within 3 days of being here, Ian asked me to come and join him in the studio, but I'm leaving in a few days.
But taking a break, I don't think anybody who's been following what you've been doing over the last few weeks would classify that as taking a break.
Can't help it. Once you know it, you can't unknow it. With all the stuff that happened in Lancashire, I couldn't. I brought a laptop with me.
Well, thank goodness for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. No, I think that everybody out there would agree that Vanessa does an outstanding job in terms of particularly getting the information out on almost a real-time basis.
Yeah.
Yeah. So keeping people informed, up to speed of what's going on, right? Not just across the country, but also in the other countries, in the US and in Australia. And talking of Australia, I actually have to make the observation that, of course, John Jenkin, who featured in Voices from the Gasfields, was in court last week up on a trumped-up charge. And apparently he'd made a comment on social media that along the lines of an only good QGC worker was a dead one. And that led to John living under the cloud of legal action for a little over a year. But when he got to court last Wednesday, basically the case was thrown out. So yet more evidence of intimidatory tactics by the unconventional gas industry. And of course QGC was, until recently, a British-owned company. It was part of BG Group, part of the British gas empire that was spun off in 1986 under the Thatcher government. But earlier this year, BG Group was acquired by Shell. So QGC, sadly, unfortunately, is frying pan to fire. Rings a bell there, or comes to mind.
Yep.
So, what's been going on this week? Well, it's been quite a remarkable week. Obviously, when we were with you last week, there was the euphoria of the decision in Lancashire, in Preston, by Lancashire County Council to reject Cuadrilla's application to drill 2 wells in the Fylde Peninsula. The well at Rossiter was always thought to be going to be rejected and was considered actually to be a bit of a Trojan horse. But the real target being Preston New Road, which was rejected last Monday, much to, I think, everyone's amazement, really. But it was rejected by 10-4 on the final count. So a truly remarkable result. Huh?
Remarkable result, but not forgetting the Trojan aspect of Rossiter.
Exactly, because what wasn't shut down was the application to establish an 80-plus seismic array, plus to drill 3 monitoring wells on the well site, which would mean that if Cuadrilla went ahead with that part of the application, they would actually have to establish a well site at Rossiter. So I think there are moves afoot now to try and reverse that decision.
I believe so, because we were led to believe that it was only permitted because the councillors wasn't within their remit to refuse it on its own merits. Hence the if you've refused permission for a battleship, why then give permission for a dry dock? And then a few days later at Preston New Road, the opposite happened and it was refused. So drilling having been refused at Rossiter, monitoring then approved at Rossiter, drilling refused at Preston New Road, monitoring refused at Preston New Road. So if they can refuse it at Preston New Road, they can refuse it at Rossiter, because otherwise they now have, as Ian has said, permission potentially to reapply to frack in future, and crucially, after the little any substance clause in the Infrastructure Act, they can leave any substance behind in those boreholes even, or whatever they do beyond that. So this all has to be scrutinised and, if necessary, taken to judicial review.
Well, and it certainly seemed to me, by the way, you're looking very casual there, the leg up on the desk. It seemed to me that the whole issue of the seismic arrays was somewhat rushed through on the basis that they had rejected the application for the well, but then literally within 10 minutes they had effectively been railroaded into approving the application for the seismic arrays.
When everybody was off on Facebook celebrating the drilling being refused. Yeah.
So yes, I think certainly good grounds for a judicial review potentially. So that was Monday, but the week actually got even more interesting because on the following day, in fact on the Tuesday morning, I was actually sent a photograph. And the reason that the person had sent me this photograph was because they were interested to try to identify the head or a name associated with the head that can be seen just to the left of Stuart Perrigo on his right. That's the, if we can pull up here, this is Stuart Perrigo. He's the council planning officer. And this is the person that seemed to have ready access to Stuart Perrigo. And although she was sitting in what was regarded as the press area, it's very unusual for the press to have such open access to the chief planning officer. So I was sent the photograph and I thought I recognised this particular individual. So with a little piece of zooming in, here we see the person there, and it looked very much like this particular individual. Now, this lady had actually come onto my radar about 18 months previously when she had appeared at Barton Moss. In fact, she appeared at Barton Moss on December the 23rd of 2013. And she actually had her own police escort. She, when I say police escort, it was a courtesy escort. One of the police liaison officers was assigned to accompany her on the walk-in of the trucks on that day, the back end of 2013. Well, I walked down the road with this lady and was trying to sort of share some insights with her and also get her perspective on things. She wasn't particularly forthcoming, but at the end of the walk, I asked her to identify herself, and she refused to do so, which was a bit like red rag to a bull. Because once I got back to the caravan and went online, it took me about 30 nanoseconds to establish that she was a lady by the name of Amanda Webster, who fulfills multiple roles. She's a solicitor with a firm in Preston called Harrison Drury. She's also Assistant Police Commissioner, Police and Crime Commissioner with Lancashire Constabulary. And here's a quote from Amanda Webster. It appeared in the Lancaster Evening Post a few years ago, and she said, "Unless a commercial organisation succeeds, people are out of a job. And sometimes the work I do can mean the difference between success and failure. Whether it's a one-man band trying to feed his family or a big corporation employing thousands, the principle's just the same." Well, unless, of course, it is that corporation is looking to undertake an activity which might be detrimental to the wider community. But this is Amanda Webster. And in her role as a solicitor with Harrison Drury, she is regarded as a specialist protest buster. And in fact, it's thanks to Amanda Webster that the term swampy actually found its way into the British vocabulary, because it was a term she coined during the trials of the protesters of the A303.
Didn't know she went back that far.
Oh yes, oh yes. So, what was Amanda Webster? Protest buster, solicitor with Harrison Drury, Assistant Police and Crime Commissioner with Lancashire Constabulary. What was she doing bending the ear of Stuart Perrigo? Well, we're about to find out, I think, because allegedly, yes, there's a possibility that I might be mistaken. Don't think so, but there's a possibility. So I send a Freedom of Information request to Lancashire County Council, and this is what I've said. Amanda Webster of Harrison Drury Solicitors was photographed speaking with Stuart Perrigo during the Lancashire County Council Planning Committee meeting on the morning of Monday, 29th of June, 2015. 1. Please disclose the precise nature of Miss Webster's participation in these proceedings and on what basis she had direct access to Stuart Perrigo during the proceedings. 2. Was Miss Webster advising Stuart Perrigo as counsel for Lancashire County Council or for Quadrilla? Because previously her track record is that she's been representing the corporations. So assuming for the purposes of discussion that I am correct in the identification, what would your conjecture be, Vanessa?
Shenanigans, I think, would be the conjecture, but we have to see whether it really is her or not, and let's see what happens with her. One would imagine that if it weren't her, they would have replied by now to say, don't be so silly, it's not her.
Absolutely.
Wouldn't you?
You would think so, because they've had almost a week to respond, and you would think that they would nip it in the bud. And
you'd think, yeah.
You'd think. But, you know, it's interesting, whoever it was, because, of course, if it, for whatever reason, if Lancashire County Council suggests that it wasn't Amanda Webster, then the next Freedom of Information request will, of course, be to identify this individual, because, you know, she's clearly not known to some of the councillors, because we actually asked one or two of the councillors if they could identify her, and they weren't able to put a name to it. But one of them did say that she had attended a couple of previous meetings where Quadrilla's application was being discussed, informal meetings. So it's going to be interesting to see how this pans out, because if she was representing Quadrilla and was able to literally have the ear of Stuart Perrigo, then of course it smacks of outright bias, because, you know, how come the opponents to the application didn't have the opportunity to have their counsel bend Stuart Perrigo's ear?
Indeed, and why it had to be given to them on sheets of paper by Friends of the Earth on the way in the next week, and then they were given on request, when we thought they might be given a week or a month, they were given 10 minutes to look at it. Isn't there also a question about the basis upon which Stuart Perrigo was still involved? Because hasn't he actually left the council and retired, and therefore who's paying him for this?
Well, that's very interesting. I mean, it is reported, I'm sure it will be the subject of a Freedom of Information request, but it is reported that Stuart Perrigo had actually been retained in a sort of consultancy role to push this through. And at a meeting that I attended last week, it was reported that Stuart Perrigo had actually stated to individuals within DEC that he would, and I quote, deliver the goods. Now, if that's the case, once again, what we're potentially seeing here is a county council planning officer demonstrate extreme bias. Now, we know, obviously, he had recommended that Quadrilla's application to FRAC at Preston New Road be approved, and seemed to be doing everything within his power to direct the planning committee in that way.
Out the pram when it was refused, and made them come back with their reasons and vote on it again.
Well, and in fact, he's done us a massive favour, actually, because his behaviour has actually highlighted the the total lack of democracy, true democracy. And I think that it backfired, because I think that just from watching the archive of the live streams, it's very evident that some of the councillors were extremely frustrated by this evident pressure, not just from Westminster, but from their own officers, to sort of effectively just accept their recommendation and simply rubber stamp it.
Not to mention which we haven't mentioned this episode, the legal advice they were given, which said they would be breaking the law if they refused it, which was then diluted when it got into writing, and that wasn't there.
Well, I think it actually said that they may be acting unlawfully.
No, breaking the law.
Breaking the law? That was the verbal statement.
Yes, that's what they were told verbally. Yep.
That's completely outrageous. But thank you very much, Lancashire County Council, because you've given us prima facie evidence of the magnitude of the determination. Not that we were in any doubt. And in fact, that determination was in further evidence the following day, after the Lancashire County Council meeting on the Monday the 29th. On Tuesday the 30th, on the morning at 11 o'clock, there was a parliamentary debate. Now, as you can see from the picture on the screen here, this parliamentary debate wasn't in Parliament. Like many debates, it was held in the annex of Westminster Central Hall. And really, the point of these debates is purely as a charade. It's purely to record in Hansard that there has been discussion on issues and make it appear as though democratic process is actually being upheld. Now, this debate was called by Kevin Hollinrake. You calling your mum?
No, I'm checking Mr. Hollinrake's quote. Ian.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, just checking. Hang on, my earpiece is falling out here. Right,
very professional operation. This, yeah.
Kevin Hollinrake. He is the MP for the new MP for Thirsk and Moreton, which is effectively Rydale in North Yorkshire. So he had called the debate, and of course then MPs have the opportunity to participate, to register their intention to speak at this debate. But the time is limited to 2 hours. So although the debate starts with no time restriction, eventually the chairman has to put increasing time restrictions on speakers. So the first ones get to speak as long as they want, then the middle ones get to speak for 5 minutes, and then it comes down to 3 minutes, and so on and so forth. Well, I'm just going to share the first couple of paragraphs of Kevin Honninrake's opening speech, because it pretty much set the tone for everyone else who was participating. And this is Kevin Honninrake, Conservative MP. He said, "On Saturday morning, I visited the village of Kirby Misperton in my constituency, where an application to drill for shale gas has recently been submitted. Of about 50 people in attendance, 44 were against fracking and 6 had an open mind. None was in favour. These people are not professional campaigners. They are decent local people, desperately worried that fracking will change their lives forever and not for the better. Their concerns mainly centre on safety, the potential for contamination of water supplies and air pollution. During production and after the producer has made their money and left, the spoiling of countryside by drilling rigs, noise and light pollution and lorry movements, and at the end of the day, who cleans up and who pays up if things go wrong." Now, that was just the opening paragraphs in his presentation. He made a couple of other observations.
That's quite extraordinary for a Conservative MP to say. What is puzzling me slightly is that I didn't watch the debate. I wasn't able to at that point. Fracking sites should be 6 miles apart to prevent industrialisation of the countryside. Well, that suggests that that's smacking of the old make all the statement about it, but then regulate it and mitigate it and make it okay. 6 miles apart isn't going to make it okay. But he said, well, I'm coming to this from not knowing where he's coming from. I've just read that, and I've read this, which says he vowed to fight tooth and nail to prevent any shale gas development happening, which sounds great, in a way that industrialises the landscape, is the caveat. So what is he...
Well,
what's he doing?
I'm certainly not making any excuses for these people, but I mean, I think they are treading a very fine line because, interestingly, every single speaker, and there were speakers from the Conservative Party, from the Labour Party, from the Ulster Unionists, and from the Scottish Nationalist Party, right. And with one exception, every single speaker either basically was openly against the unconventional gas agenda, or was effectively saying progress with extreme caution.
Were they openly convincingly against it? Because it's become a Labour leadership and a Lib Dem leadership.
No, the other speakers, many of the other speakers were openly against. Mark Menzies of the Fylde conveniently ran out of time for him to talk. But the only participant in the debate that was openly for was a Labour MP from one of the Manchester, I think it was a Blackburn constituency. But the debate ran for 2 hours, and like I said, pretty much everyone was basically saying either we're against or progress with extreme caution. Now, the government has the opportunity to effectively present the final statement, and this was the first time that I've seen Andrea Leadsom in action. Now, she is the newly appointed Minister of State for Energy. She reports into Amber Rudd, who we have discussed on this programme before. And of course, Amber Rudd is absolutely perfectly qualified to be Secretary of State for Energy and Climate Change because she knows absolutely nothing about the subjects and will simply do as she's told. As will Andrea Leadsom. Now, you can find the full text of her presentation in Hansard, but I'll save you the trouble of looking for it because despite sitting through, and as far as I'm aware, she was there for the duration, but despite sitting through the almost 2 hours of debate, she simply read out her pre-prepared statement, which basically, in a nutshell, said, screw you, we're going to do it anyway. So if anyone was in any doubt that basically the government is still determined to push forward with this agenda, then Andrea Leadsom certainly helped lay that to rest. But the following day, if I can find my screen, there we go. The following day, in Parliament at Prime Minister's Questions, Cat Smith, who is the Labour MP for Lancaster and Fleetwood, managed to get a question in, and it was a very succinct question. She said, given the Prime Minister's commitment to localism, will he stand by and respect the decision made by Lancashire County Council this week to reject fracking, yes or no? So there you go, yes or no. So what's your betting, Vanessa? Do you think David Cameron responded with a yes or no?
I was just trying to find the exact quote, but in his response he said, I want to see us exploit. No, he didn't say exploit. What did he say?
Well, here we got the quote here.
Yes, he did. All our natural resources.
There you go. Can you read that?
Where is it?
That's the response.
Yeah, personally I hope that over time unconventional gas sites will go ahead, whether in Lancashire or elsewhere, because I want our country to exploit all the natural resources that we have.
So once again, basically, David Cameron saying, well, you know, screw you, because we're now doing everything we possibly can to make sure that local authorities are not able to block these applications in future. Now, it has to be said that one of the most significant elements in the success in Lancashire was the fact that protocol within Lancashire County Council gave everybody who wanted to object the opportunity to present. If it was an individual, they could speak for 4 minutes. If it was a local group, they could speak, I think, for 20 minutes. And if it was a specialist, they had up to 30 minutes. Right. And this was very significant because elsewhere, what we've seen is one representative for the applicant and one representing those who are against to simply speak for 4 minutes, which is totally inadequate.
Well, yeah. How can you... Did they listen anyway?
No. No, based on my experience in East Yorkshire, they don't listen.
No. And based on the experience in West Sussex County Council, they have 60-page documents carefully thought out, carefully researched, and the decisions are forward a conclusion, and it's all ignored anyway.
So the wonderful legal counsel that has stepped in to provide truly outstanding advice that helped achieve the decision in Preston a week ago, I think we now need that resource and that expertise to look at forcing other planning authorities to adopt the same practice as in Preston.
What is going to happen? What do you think will happen about the localisation or the centralisation?
Well, unless we're able to block it in some way, then it's going to be accelerated. That's, I think, sadly, the nature of the...
Why haven't they done it already? Because they've been talking about this for ages, and they've obviously been thinking about it long before that.
Because it might be a little bit too obvious.
Well, like we're not going to notice anyway.
Hey, we're going to come back to this discussion. We're going to take a short break now, and when we come back, we're going to be joined by Sue Goff, who is a resident within Kevin get the right teeth in. Kevin Hollingerake's constituency in Thirsk and Morton. So we'll see you after this short break.
Do you suffer from arthritis or have weak joints? Is it making your life hard? Sharp Tech, nature's best kept secret for strong joints and a powerful immune system. Sharp Tech, the product with bite. Visit us at www.sharptech.org.
And welcome back to part 2 of A Fracking Nightmare. So we're now joined by Sue Goff from Ryedale. Sue, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. It's good to be here.
Excellent, and I see you've got a prominent Frack-Free Ryedale sticker on the wall behind you.
Of course.
So now you are a Kevin Hollingrake constituent. Yes. So did you watch the debate or see any reports on the debate from last Tuesday?
Yes. I caught the last 20 minutes, which was the worst 20 minutes, because that was where the Minister completely disregarded the entire debate and just read out her party political statement on fracking. And I've caught I've looked at feedback since. I haven't had a chance. I've been so busy with other stuff that to watch the whole thing. But yeah, I agree with what you said previously about it, that there was a very good debate actually, and most people were concerned against or concerned from safety points of view, and then the minister completely squashed it all by reading out this completely party political statement which completely and utterly disregarded the entire debate that just happened, which I thought was terrible.
Well, in fact, I mean, it works again to our advantage because, I've already taken clips from that debate and we'll be showing them in future presentations, because what it does is it highlights the fact that basically, your MP, Kevin Hollinrake in your case, may make all the right noises to the constituents, but ultimately, even though they're part of the government, basically it doesn't really matter.
Exactly. They're ignoring the democratic process in this whole thing to do with fracking. And it makes people feel very threatened, but it makes people angry enough to get up and activate themselves, I think. I've never been on a demonstration before fracking. And I'm quite astounded at how political I've become. I think it's quite remarkable. And lots of people are the same as I am. We, like, as Kevin very fairly pointed out, we're not professional activists. We are ordinary citizens of Rydale who are very concerned about the safety of our livelihoods and the safety of the water supply, the land that the crops are grown on and the animals that we eat feed on. And I think that there's a lot more investigation that needs to be done before we allow fracking. I don't think fracking should be allowed anywhere on the planet, to be honest, but I've always thought that. And I first became aware of it a good few years ago, and thought then, when I saw reports coming in about America, that this cannot be right, and thank goodness it hasn't happened here. And it has. Well, it will. They're trying to make it happen here, so it's pretty scary.
Well, I mentioned, in fact, I think on last week's show, when we were having, or maybe 2 weeks ago, when we were having a discussion with Tina Louise, that perversely, the government is deliberately targeting Tory-held constituencies as the initial sacrifice zones. And their perverse logic is that, by definition, Tory-held constituencies are generally Middle England. And that once due process has been seen to be exhausted, then Middle England will simply roll over and say, oh, well, we tried, can't stop it, and just get on with their daily lives.
I know. It just beggars belief. I just find it would be funny if it wasn't so serious, would it not? I mean, it's frightening when you consider the implications that our democratic rights are just being taken out from under our feet. It leaves me speechless. And I was listening to the radio this morning. No, it was late this afternoon. The MP that had been dealing with child molestation and all that, and he was talking about how it affected him, and that he was having to take a step back because it affected his own mental well-being. And I thought, yes, several people that I know who are involved in the anti-fracking were talking in very similar ways, as have I. And you do have to try very hard to keep a balance with, your own sort of, we are allowed a life, but this is so important that we get sort of dragged along. As Vanessa said when I was talking earlier, that you cannot stop because it's too important. We have to keep going. We have to keep fighting it. We will win. I'm convinced that we will win.
Well, this is what the industry and the government seem to fail to completely understand. And the observation, in fact, that I made to the Third Energy representative that was sitting behind me in Helmsley at the Ebbston Moor hearing, and when he basically held his head in his hands and said, "What do you got to do? What do you got to do? Everything we do, it's still not enough." And I turned around to him and I said, it doesn't matter what you do because you're only doing it because you're on the payroll. These people are doing it because they're passionate. and passion trumps payroll any day of the week.
But I find that, I mean, we are passionate. We're passionate, but we are also informed, and we do get labelled because we're passionate. Therefore, our opinions they don't count, because we're just a load of people who have got something, you know, that they've gripped onto something to make us about. It's very interesting to me that when we appear before any kind of discussion, council planning application meetings, that people who are against fracking are very often dismissed as purely emotional and not concerned with the facts. And therefore we're not respected in the same way as John Dewar from Third Energy might be, who is, oh, well, it's John Dewar, and you know, he is from Third Energy, and therefore he is speaking the truth and he knows what he's talking about. I don't doubt John Dewar is a very good engineer. I read that in everything that he's told me about the process, but he does not know what will happen if he tries to frack, and he cannot know. And to say that it's a minimum risk that the water could be contaminated or other things can happen is not good enough, because it's only a few hundred yards from where people live. It's not good enough anyway, but to have anything like that going on in the vicinity where people are trying to live their everyday lives is just unbelievable.
Well, that's right, because the well that Third Energy want to frack is actually, I think, about 600 yards from the nearest property.
I think so.
And then between 600 and 1,000, well, 600 metres, between 600 metres and 1,000 metres is almost the entire village of Kirkby Misperton, because I know when I did the measurements, it's exactly 1 kilometre between the well and the entrance to Flamingo Land.
Exactly. And my own house is in a different village, but is about 1 kilometre as the crow flies from the well. And I mean, I would fight it if it was 50 miles away. Don't get me wrong, I'm not a NIMBY at all, but it's just appalling the way people are being railroaded into this, which is why we set out in Kirkby Misperton to invite the local people to have come and to talk to us. We have regular coffee mornings, we have delicious cake and coffee and lots of information and some activities for children. And we are gradually winning the people round. And it's interesting that there are lots of people who don't know much about fracking. There are a very tiny minority who say they're for it. But of all the people I know that have investigated and taken the trouble to find out more for themselves what fracking is and what it means, they are always against it once they've done the research.
So what do you think the effect will be, Sue, of this very transparent bit of Murdoch attempt at manoeuvring that was in the Times a couple of days ago? The headline that says, if Lancashire won't frack, we will, insist Yorkshire residents. This is I was incensed. This was on Saturday. Well, I don't know if I was incensed because it doesn't surprise me, but it is mind-boggling that Ben Webster, who is the environment editor of the Times, wrote this article. He's interviewed one, but I know you're going to tell us more about how he interviewed you, and that wasn't included. But essentially what he's done is talked to one failed Tory council candidate B&B owner, which is a pattern in lots of communities that have been threatened with fracking. It's the ladies who own the B&Bs, oddly, who don't seem to realise what it's going to do to the tourism if they are genuinely ladies who own B&Bs. You talk about it, happened to you, he interviewed you, he didn't even include you.
Well, he didn't interview me, to be fair. I was asked to respond to some questions by email. I was given a list of questions and I then responded to them. Questions such as, you just bear with me, what are your objections to the Third Energy application? Do you trust the regulators, the Environment Agency and the Health and Safety Executive, to regulate fracking properly? Do you think fracking will bring economic benefits to Ryedale? So I gave my responses to those, quite well prepared. It took some time, and he didn't mention any of that in the article. And you know, in riposte to the B&B lady, Ms. or Mrs. Allenson, there are lots of people who own B&Bs who are very aware how dangerous fracking is or can be, and they're against it. It's a set-up job. It's a, you know, Tory paper.
Yeah.
They've used it to support the fracking.
Absolutely. I wonder, my concern is how many people, I don't know how many people do read the Times, and because there's a paywall online, that many people probably don't read it online either. But the number of people who do see that, who will see, I mean, it's a complete grandstanding for the industry, as you said. They dismissed Chris and Adela Redston because they live in London, even though Adela's grew up there and her parents are there, etc., etc. And they cited this residents group, pro-fracking residents group, which constitutes, it appears, a Facebook page which had 44 likes on that day, and today I think it had 57.
I think so.
And it's full of fake profiles, and I'll just say this, known trolls and shills who have physically trolled Somerset, who've been on the Blackpool Fracking for a Better Future, Bitter Future group, same people, same nonsense, and she deletes anybody who comes in as a voice of reason. So what's that?
That doesn't surprise me at all. I have not even gone on their Facebook page. I've just seen what was going on, and I wouldn't give them the sort of the satisfaction of knowing that someone else had a look. Yeah. I have no time for these people. I really don't.
No.
We have to be aware of them, obviously, and we do have to watch what they're doing as they are watching us. But in response to their pathetic 50 members, we have now over 2,000 members in Rydale who are against fracking. There's just been a new group set up in Scarborough. They're mobilising over there. A new group formed a couple of weeks ago in Pickering. Everywhere in Rydale is becoming really aware of this issue, and we're against it. Full stop. They're not going to bamboozle us with this pathetic attempt at media manipulation.
Well, it's good that Scarborough have now formed a group, because at the last Ebbston Moor hearing, of course, the North York Moor's own hydrologist consultant, when he was asked a direct question about Scarborough's water, because Scarborough gets its water from the aquifer that flows right under Ebbston Moor, and when he was asked a direct question about the potential impact on Scarborough's water if the aquifer should be contaminated, and his response was a one-liner. He said, well, there is no plan B.
Exactly.
So, you know, that should certainly get the people of Scarborough motivated.
I think it has. I think that really has. And you know, again, that is not good enough.
No, absolutely. And I actually got a couple of graphics here of Kirby Misperton. Let's take a look here, because this is Kirby Misperton. Here's the well site, and this is the village here. Yeah. And then here is literally Yorkshire's biggest tourist attraction in terms of revenue generation. Yeah. And it is exactly 1 kilometre. 1 kilometre from the well site to the entrance. And of course, the village effectively lies in between. So, you know, and the people, the residents of this village, they really need look no further than the experiences of the villagers in West Newton, in East Yorkshire. Yeah. And, you know, Rathlin Energy made a right pig's ear of that well. And, you know, we've really nothing to suggest that Third Energy won't do exactly the same in Kirby Misperton.
Mr. Dewar has repeatedly told us that we should trust him. So maybe we should. I don't know. No, I do know. We told him quite frankly we don't trust him. We're not fooled by his sort of manipulative talk, and we've caught him out at least 3 times lying about the nature of the people that attend the anti-fracking meetings in Rydale. He told the press and a parliamentary select committee hearing with Anne McIntosh chairing that the people at the meeting held by the council, which was called Unpacking Fracking, was that the audience were bussed in from Lancashire. They were not bussed in from Lancashire. It was a ticket-only event, and they were all Rydale residents, apart from a couple of people on the stage who were giving presentations. But that's just a minor thing. I mean, he talks I think he says things off the top of his head because he gets rattled by our knowledge and our resistance to his charm, because he can be a very charming man, and then he'll just spurt anything out that he thinks of that he thinks might shut us up.
Well, but this is their modus operandi, isn't it, Sue? You know, I mean, they do this over and over. Were you at the meeting in, was it Kirby? No, it was in Kirby Moorside. And I think it was the back end of last year, and it was organised by the mayor, the local mayor, who had invited the geologists from Refine.
Yeah, I was not at that one. I was ill. My husband was, and he wasn't impressed at the time either. But yeah, I think it was quite fraught from what I gathered.
It was a packed house.
Yes.
And the 3 professors from Refine, which is based at Durham University, spent the first 20 minutes explaining that despite the fact they were funded by Shell and Total, they were completely independent. Right. To many groans within the audience. But what then transpired was that the level of knowledge and awareness in the audience actually, I mean, I would almost say that I felt sorry for the academics. That's not true, of course I didn't. But the fracademics, exactly. Yeah. But I mean, their knowledge of detail was found to be extremely lacking.
Yes, I think that's true. And I think that was obvious when we went to the Environment Agency's consultation as well. It was very well attended, and I sat with my list of questions and said, look, do you mind if I go through all of these and write down the answers, because I'm really worried about this. And it was fairly obvious that they did not have the answers about water contamination, where the water would be cleaned or purified at the end of the process. And at various stages, they just looked at me and Adela, who was sitting with me, and said, I don't know. They don't know.
They don't know, exactly.
If they don't know, is it right that they should be going ahead with this process? It's not, and it's not good enough.
Absolutely.
That's why I fight it.
They absolutely rely on blag. And the one thing that you will never hear either the industry or the government say is, look, don't take our word for it. Please check it out for yourself. Because they know very well that when people do check it out for themselves, they're going to literally wake up to the reality and realise that this is something that we shouldn't be having anywhere in the UK, let alone North Yorkshire. Exactly.
Anywhere in the UK, it should be stopped everywhere on the planet, let alone, you know, the UK. It should be stopped now. It's not viable. Fossil fuels should be left in the ground now. The development of renewables has come on apace, and that surely is where the money should be going, to develop that and bring it on board. I know you can't swap from one to the other immediately, but it's been proven time and again that the renewables can provide the energy we need. And have you actually heard anyone talk about saving energy?
You know, the lights off occasionally instead of keeping them on all the time. Yeah.
All the factory buildings and all the office blocks that have their lights on all night. What is that all about?
It's about revenue, partnership. Yeah.
Yeah. You need to make a Factory Rydell T-shirt, Sue, with "It's just not good enough." You've said that 4 times. I think that needs to be a theme.
I'm sorry. Well, it's not.
It's not. No, I mean it. I'm serious.
Okay, so I've repeated myself.
Okay, well, while you, to save you repeating yourself again, we're going to take a short break. In this break, we're going to look again at the clip from Mind the Matrix, a film that was produced by Christian van Wyk, a New Zealand-based Dutch citizen. And this film was released on YouTube a little over a week ago, and as of right now, it's had a little over 10,000 views. Now, Christian made an effort to come and interview me whilst I was up at Crawberry Hill in East Yorkshire in August of last year. And she has dedicated about 5 minutes or so of the film to explaining the unconventional gas agenda. So watch this extract, and then please click online and go watch the full version of Mind the Matrix, and we'll be back with you after this short break.
some sort of internet fraud or something.
A solution to something that isn't particularly sensible, like what many other solutions that we've come up with as humans that don't work.
Problems with it are somewhat over-exaggerated.
Just another get-rich-quick for a whole lot of unscrupulous miners, I think.
I think it needs further investigation.
People need to realise a country needs to be run like a business. You can't get left behind in the world, and if you want to make money, you need to use your resources.
I have very negative feelings about that.
Exportation of unconventional gas involves pumping millions of gallons of a mixture containing water, sand and chemicals at pressures of up to 15,000 pounds per square inch into the target geology to fracture the rock and release the trapped gas. This is known as hydraulic fracturing or fracking. Approximately 40% what is pumped down the well is actually recovered. Where that gas and fluids escape to cannot be totally controlled.
This is my home up here on Crawberry Hill. It's actually it's been my home since January, when it was donated to me by somebody who saw me doing a live broadcast from my tent on Barton Moss in Manchester. You know, this is an industry, the unconventional gas industry, that has left an absolute trail of devastation wherever it has been unleashed. And although it's classified as a novel industry in the UK, there's nothing novel about it, because we have 20 years of experience of this industry from the US, from Canada, and much more recently, of course, from Australia. And the evidence of the damage, the contamination to water, soil, air, the impact on people's health is absolutely horrendous. One well that has been drilled and subjected to a full frack, and that was at Priest Hall over the other side of the country near Blackpool in 2011, and that resulted in 2 minor seismic events, one on April 1st and the following one on May 27th, which resulted in some 80 properties being damaged. François Hollande, the president of France, and he upheld the presidential ban on hydraulic fracturing that was imposed by his predecessor, Sarkozy. But a Texan company called Studbach took the French government to court and tried to get that presidential ban lifted, but the courts upheld the presidential ban. It doesn't work. The only thing that is proven is that it causes horrendous contamination of the water table, the soils, the air. It has a horrendous impact on the health of the people who live close by and those who live downwind.
And this is proven?
Absolutely. I mean, the evidence is irrefutable. Well, eventually, of course, what they will look for in the EU is what they call harmonisation. And those countries that are opposing it right now will be forced, potentially, to allow hydraulic fracturing in their territory. I mean, the countries that are strongest against fracking right now, interestingly, are the 2 countries very much at the heart of the EU, and that's Germany and France. Elsewhere, there is an enormous pressure to get this industry up and running. In the US, the water is being sucked out of the Great Lakes, the Great River System, and the great aquifers under the western states. People who live in the western states are having their lives destroyed. In Australia, the Great Artesian Basin is being sucked dry at a rate 6 times greater than it can naturally replenish. Here in the UK, if this industry kicks off, within a generation, the UK will be uninhabitable. And this whole deal of demonizing Russia and using, of course, the Ukraine crisis to facilitate this. The whole Ukraine crisis is, of course, manipulated. Totally manipulated. It's manipulated by those who believe themselves to be the rightful rulers of a planetary fiefdom. And the real target of this is Russia. And the reason being is that Putin has done an amazing job, of course, of gaining significant independence from the global banking establishment. And now they want to try to destroy his economy. And Russia, of course, does export gas into Eastern Europe and into Germany. The US unconventional gas industry has drilled something in the region of 500,000 wells in the last decade, and now they have a surplus of gas. So the US is desperate to find an export market for this surplus gas. And by forcing the EU to implement sanctions against Russia and stop importing gas from Russia, of course, what the US is doing is shutting off that gas market from Russia and saying, well, you know, buy ours.
Right, well.
And welcome back to part 3 of Fracking Nightmare. So that's Mind the Matrix. So you find that online, and you know, I don't normally watch films that run to 2 hours in length, but I got to say that one absolutely gripped my attention. A lot of good information there. Now, we already talked about David Cameron and his response to Cat Smith in Prime Minister's Questions last week. But later that day, DEFRA were forced to release the unredacted or supposed unredacted report that they had censored in some 63 places when it was released earlier this year. Now, this is thanks to Friends of the Earth and the pressure that they put on the Information Commissioner to get this document released. It is online. I would encourage you to not only go seek it out, but also to download it, because I wouldn't be surprised if it disappears fairly quickly.
It's linked to the cover photo on the Britain and Ireland Frack Free Facebook page.
So, DEFRA have put a covering note on the report. And basically, this is effectively their attempt at trying to play down the content of the report. This is the covering note. It says, this paper is an early draft of an internal document. It is not analytically robust. Now, that might as well be straight out of a script from Yes Minister. In fact, a scene that we used in the Voices from the Gasfields documentary, we were talking about this report. The draft paper was intended as a review of existing literature. No, it wasn't. It includes early, often vague assumptions which are not supported by appropriate evidence. These were never intended as considered DEFRA positions or as statements of fact. Containing no new evidence, the paper simply refers to data from overseas studies which cannot be used to predict impacts in the UK with any degree of reliability. The author of the paper was not asked to consider and did not have an in-depth knowledge of the UK regulatory framework. It goes on, in June 2012, the Royal Society and Royal Academy of Engineering report concluded that environmental and health and safety risks can be managed effectively in the UK if operational best practices are enforced through regulation. Notice that, if operational best practices are enforced. The UK has a rigorous and robust regulatory regime, which it doesn't, which is fully capable of preventing and managing any risks, which it isn't. So the bottom line is that you know, this report clearly did not say anything that the government wanted it to say, which is why they took the decision to discredit it, and then when they were forced to release it, actually redact it. So Vanessa, you got a couple of observations from this report.
Farmers Weekly came out shortly after the release of the unredacted, as far as we know, fully unredacted. We don't even know for sure that it is, but the government has not fully considered the potential risks to farming and food production posed by fracking, despite the fact that drilling will, it says would, I prefer to say would, unless we stop it, take place largely in the countryside. It says the 22-page report devotes just 2 sentences to farming, in which it did say, it warns that the industrialisation of the landscape from shale gas exploration could adversely impact farming and rural tourism businesses, and that possible surface water pollution could impact people who, it's not just about the air and the water, this is what most people will have thought this through, impact people who ate contaminated wildlife, livestock or agricultural products. It's a food chain thing.
Absolutely, and for those who want to do a little bit more research for themselves on the agricultural impacts, then look no further than the work of Dr. Robert Oswald, who did a study, I think in about 8 separate states around the US, looking at the impact that this insidious industry had on agriculture, both arable and livestock. So that's the DEFRA report. Like I said, do go track it down. Do download it, do read it. It also talks about the reduction in house prices. In my opinion, that's part of the report that it got wrong, because it said that properties may fall by 7% in your dreams, as we're already seeing in the Balcombe area.
Well, yeah, the Balcombe camp. So 2 years ago, a chap pulled up in his 4x4, and he'd been to meetings before, and he was pro-fracking. He came to the meetings, but he was quite clear he didn't have a problem with it. He came, pulled up, and he said, "I've just had my house revalued. It's gone down 15%." That was then.
And of course, we've talked about the lady who lived next to Rossiter, and hopefully she's still celebrating, because her property had basically been valued as having zero value, whilst the Rossiter application was outstanding. Now that that application, or at least the drilling part of the application, has been rejected, then hopefully she's sleeping a little bit easier. Now, we're literally coming into the last few minutes of the programme, and we'll just have a quick look at the stock. And I just want to take a look at AJ Lucas's stock, because AJ Lucas is a 45% owner of Quadrilla. And, I mean, although the stock fell after the announcement last week, something seems to have happened in Australia. This is an Australian company, to have given the investors in AJ Lucas some kind of false hope, because the stock price did recover on Friday. It's still just under 40 cents, which is about just under 20 pence, so a long way short of its high. But I'm not sure why the stock at this moment has taken a bit of a leap in the upward direction, because it certainly shouldn't have done. Meanwhile, of course, iGas is going in the usual direction. It's hanging around the mid-20s right now. But iGas certainly have their eyes set on Mistons Springs, as well as a number of other potential sites in the northwest and in the south. So iGas still determined to be a major player. And there's no question that as the iGas stock falls south, then Jim Ratcliffe of Ineos will be looking at it as a potential acquisition. So, when we hear people talk about the fact that Lancashire is a victory and we've won, it's a great victory. There's no question about that. It's an absolutely stunning result, a seminal result. But any suggestion that we're out of the woods, I think, is a little premature.
Very, very much premature. And it's been a very fine line to balance it on social media between quite rightly celebrating and letting them know that they're on very much on the back foot, or the dying beast lashing out more and more viciously, as we're going to see with things like happened in the Times this week. But the fat lady has certainly not even, well, she's clearing her throat, but there's an awful lot of work left to do. And yes, we have to celebrate. Those of us who've been doing this for 4 years or whatever, or a year, pat ourselves on the back. But for goodness sake, let's not be complacent, and let's not encourage, let's not do all these headlines saying Lancashire will never be fracked. I've seen that headline. We don't know that. We don't know that. And if we say that too much, people will sit back. We'll go and say, "Oh, great! I haven't got to do anything more. I do anything anymore. I can just go shopping." It's
very disempowering, exactly.
Yeah.
We've got to keep the pedal to the metal, as it were. Now, Sue, you've got an important month in Ryedale, and here's the reason why. Of course, because this is a graphic that I put together a few months ago now, showing an area of Queensland that's absolutely been fracked into oblivion, and an equal area in the Fylde, East Yorks and West Sussex. And the same could apply in North Yorkshire. And of course, John Dewar has stated that he's looking to drill 90 wells, and we know that would only be the first phase. But you have the first opportunities to put the damper on this, I think, this coming month.
Yes, we do. With the KM8, the Environment Agency permit consultation has been extended by 4 weeks, and the final date is now August the 7th. And so we have until then to get our objections in. Frack Free Ryedale do offer guidelines as to how to go about this on the website. So
and the website, all people have got to search for is Frack Free Ryedale.
Yes, absolutely. You'll find it. And
sorry, before you talk about Ebbston Moor, I mean, let's be very clear. Third Energy have stated categorically that they intend to frack the KM8, the deep well that has previously been drilled at Kirby Misperton. So there's no ambiguity here whatsoever. They have every intention of conducting a full hydraulic fracture.
And we still don't know why the first application failed its validation. That's very interesting to us, but we can't seem to find out any of details on that. And then the Ebbston Moor, the planned conventional gas production and re-injection wells are going to be discussed at the North York Moors Planning Committee, which is meeting on the 23rd of July.
And that's at Helmsley, isn't it?
That's it, that's at Helmsley, yes. So there'll be plenty of people there, probably going in to talk and support, as well as outside demonstrating.
And this is absolutely crucial, of course, to Scarborough in particular, because Scarborough draws its water from the aquifer that flows beneath Ebbston Moor, and as the hydrologist stated at the last meeting, there is no plan B if Scarborough's water should be contaminated. Yeah,
that's exactly right. And Frack Free Ryedale are currently looking at the documents that have been posted. No doubt there'll be guidelines for if there's going to be any time to place further objections, there'll be guidelines and advice about that as well.
Okay, great. Sue, well, thanks very much for joining us. I shall certainly see you on the 23rd of July, if not before. Now, this coming weekend on Saturday, there is a gathering on the green at in the Blackpool area. If you want to see details of that, just go to the Facebook page of Frack Free Lancashire. It's a social gathering, but also an opportunity to come along and meet with people that have been not only studying this issue, but also actively engaged in challenging Cuadrilla and their intent to establish potentially 120 well sites on the Fylde Peninsula. So it's not over by a long stretch. As Vanessa says, the fat lady ain't singing, but she's certainly starting to get warmed up. So we've got to keep the pressure on.
Yes, absolutely keep the pressure on.
So Vanessa, thank you very much for joining us these past few weeks, and indeed for hosting the show when I was elsewhere.
Nothing like being thrown in the deep end. No, I was glad to do it. I've been glad to do it. Yeah,
it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much indeed. And Sue, thank you.
Do you think you can cope without me?
Can I cope? Can I cope without you? I know. I'll give it a whirl.
Are you going to mention your guest next week?
Ah, my guest. Thank you. Thank you for the reminder. Yes, next week we are going to be addressing the issue of radioactivity. And we did touch on this in an episode of Fracking Nightmare probably about almost a year ago now with Bear, when we were talking about the implications of radon. But we're going to go a lot deeper than that, literally and metaphorically, next week with an academic that specialises in this particular subject. It's going to be an absolutely fascinating programme. And if you were concerned about the potential contamination of your water, your soil and your air from the chemicals and the other pollutants that are injected into the well, then we also need to consider the impact of the norms, the naturally occurring active materials. And don't be put off by the fact that they are naturally occurring, because the fact that they're naturally occurring doesn't make them any less lethal. So to next week we'll be exploring that in great detail. So until then, thank you, Vanessa. Thank you, Sue. And we'll see you next week. Bye now.